Welcome back to the Mindful Mic. Today we're sitting down with professional skier, filmmaker, and public speaker Drew Petersen.
Drew's new film, Feel It All, follows his journey from the depths of suicidal depression to resilience, strength, and hope through skiing Colorado's highest peaks and running the Leadville Trail 100 ultramarathon. We'll also talk about his mission to change the culture around mental health and the events he's bringing to Boise this September.
Okay, everybody, we just want to welcome here Drew Petersen to the Mindful Mic. Hello, Drew. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Howdy, what's going on? Thanks for having me on, and I'm psyched to chat with you today.
Yeah, I would say welcome to Idaho virtually. We'll be welcoming
Yeah,
you in a couple weeks here.
yeah, I think exactly 2 weeks. I'm pretty excited.
Right. Well, why don't you tell our listeners exactly who you are and the journey that you're on and what we're going to talk about a little bit today.
Yeah, my name is Drew Peterson. I do a bunch of different things. I think the definition or like the question of like, who are you? What do you do? Is always a little funny because it's like, what do I do? Is I run around in the mountains and eat wild raspberries. And that's not really what people mean when they ask that question. But my day job is I'm a professional skier. I'm also a passionate ultra runner. That's my summer hobby. But really, most of my work in this day and age focuses on mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And that's primarily through leveraging my athletic career and combining it with my storytelling as a public speaker, a filmmaker, and a writer to tell stories about mental health. Primarily my own story. I use my story as a anecdote or a microcosm of that of our story, the story of our community. And so we're getting connected because I'm connecting all of those dots and coming up to Boise to do some events pretty soon here.
Oh, go ahead on this.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you in Boise and talk a little bit more about those events in a little bit. But I'm curious, what inspired you to start opening up about publicly about your mental health journey and inspired you to, start sharing that with others?
Yeah, I've struggled with mental health my entire life. When I was a kid, I didn't have the verbiage to even know what mental health was, and it's also, a sign of the times and also a sign of the culture and community that I grew up in. I grew up in a mountain town in Colorado, and mental health was never talked about. Simply even those words. The earliest memory that I have of suicidal thoughts is from when I was 9 years old, and so for the question of like, how did I decide to, open up and start sharing my story publicly? It was a really long and slow process, but ultimately, I knew that I was in a position that I built a career as a professional skier that I had the opportunity to help people. That's the number one thing. Knowing that I had that, and really that grew within me in a way that it just became something I had to do. It really was all consuming in that sense. And I mentioned the story back to when I was 9 years old because when I was a kid, and especially where I grew up, my heroes were pro skiers. And when I was that age, when I was growing up, if I could have heard a pro skier who I looked up to, or a professional athlete, literally anybody with that denotation next to their name, talking about mental health, talking about depression, talking about suicide, then my entire life would be different. It would have saved me 2 decades worth of pain. And now I'm in that position where I can be that for other people and where I can be that for kids now. Um, but yeah, to get to that decision to actually open up and share my story publicly, like I said, it got to the point where I felt like I had to do it. It was really this like song that I knew I had within me, but by not singing my song, I was suffocating myself, and so eventually I got to the point where I was ready.
So I'm curious because you said all the way back to 9 years old. And I think with a lot of listeners, they might be, wow, that's really young to start having those thoughts. And I know it's definitely, like we talked about, a sign of the times. I know from, we look at the 80s and 90s and we didn't talk about mental health. I'm curious. So was skiing kind of your outlet on that? Is that how you were, trying to, maybe take those emotions and those feelings and find a way to how to, deal with them. Because there wasn't a lot of resources back then.
Yeah, totally. I think, like skiing has been a mainstay through my entire life. I was all but born on a pair of skis. I started skiing when I was 9 years, or when I started skiing when I was 1.5 years old.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of always been there. And my relationship with it has just changed over time in lots of different ways. But yeah, skiing I largely used to use as an escape from my problems, um, and a way to feel something different. The way that my neurologist explained it to me was that I was desperately trying to find emotional control anywhere in life. And I was able to find that through skiing uh, at a young age, well before I could comprehend that that's what I was doing. Because in that moment, by skiing fast, by going off jumps, by jumping off cliffs, I had the control to be able to put positive chemicals into my brain. And even if it was fleeting, I was in control of my emotions finally. Yeah, so, but that's also an evolution because skiing is also just really fun. And that part's always been there, even back to when I was a little kid, too.
Well, it sounds like the way that you do it is really fun. A little bit of anxiety for me. I'm just happy to get down the mountain sometimes, all in one piece. Oh, go ahead, Grace.
So I am really curious to hear you talk a little bit about the film Feel It All. So for people listening that maybe don't know anything about it, don't know what you're doing with this film, I'd love if you could just give us the rundown of what the film is, the story behind it, and yeah, just your journey with this.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah,
like from
feel it
skiing to
all.
running, right?
Yeah, combining skiing and running. So
Mm-hmm.
Feel It All tells the story of running the Leadville 100, a 100-mile ultramarathon here in Colorado, and skiing the peaks around the course. And then I combine those experiences and use the story arc of the race itself to tell the story of my personal mental health journey, both micro and macro over my lifetime, and then also in the more acute chapter of life that it focuses on in my adult life. Um, but yeah, I created that film, for a lot of different reasons. It's my second film about mental health and about my personal mental health journey. And one element of that is combining skiing and running because those are my two outdoor passions. I knew that was also a way to help it reach more people and use it to help more people. And then actually, especially because your audience is focused on youth or parents of kids, I will share too, like one of the biggest reasons that I made a second film about mental health and why I created Feel It All was honestly to make it resonate a little bit stronger with youth. And even, the anecdote that I opened this podcast with, uh, I made the film so that I could include that line that I was 9 years old, the first memory that I have of suicidal thoughts. Because when I created that first film, Ups and Downs, I realized that that was an element of my story that I alluded to but never explicitly spoke about. And then also when I looked around in the mental health advocacy sphere, and especially from athletes, like that was a very like taboo and like next level conversation to be having. And so that was part of, you know, why I wanted to follow through on making the film. But Feel It All, has also taken the form of a lot of different elements and stories within that. It's also just a kind of a love letter to my home here in Colorado. The mountains surrounding the Leadville course really feel like home, and the Leadville 100, it's one of the most iconic 100-mile ultramarathons in the world, but it's also my like hometown race. I grew up in Silverthorne, about 40 miles north, and so all the way back to when I was a little kid, I remember it. And when I was that little kid, I started dreaming up that one day I would run it.
Oh, wow. And how long? So it's 100 miles. And how many miles are you doing a day? It varies. I know there's one section, you have to remind me what it's called that you said is like the most painful section.
Ooh,
And I'm trying to think of what it's called. But oh my gosh, maybe it sounds,
Hope
it's
Pass
all,
maybe?
maybe, yes, that's it. It sounds, I think it's all probably pretty painful. It looks like, so maybe it becomes a blur, um, but in watching that and watching you do the run and 100 miles and stuff, and then you're running, it sounds like, it looks like into the night.
Yeah, yeah. So when I run a 100 miler, it's all at once.
Oh,
So there's no breaks, there's no sleeping, there's no respite.
oh
Once the
gosh,
shotgun goes off, um, you just
you're
got to
off.
keep moving.
You're off. Yeah.
Yeah. So a 100 miler though, like is uh is unique in that you have a lot of different experiences in there, and I think that's part of why it's such a good metaphor for life and such a good metaphor for my mental health journey is because there's so many ups and downs, but then also like there's moments of joy, there's moments of pain, and like no matter which moment I'm in the race, like I know that it's always going to change. It's always going to that moment's always going to leave me, whether it be painful and negative or whether it be feeling, elated and feeling like I'm like flying on air rather than you know, running. And so yeah, it changes throughout. But yeah, you also mentioned like going into the night, and I think like that's, part of the metaphor within there too is going into the darkness. And it was really difficult from a filmmaking perspective to like really capture that. And I'm really proud of like how we were able to do so. And funny enough, like when I was running that race, that was the 2022 Leadville 100. And uh, I like my first like kind of like big struggle or big challenge in that race is around mile 30. And when I like kind of hit a wall around mile 30, I was kind of beating myself up. I was like, man, I'm screwing up this race. Like this is gonna mess up the film. Like I'm wasting, this year of training that I put into this race. And then ironically, like by the end of the race, I'm like, man, I messed up this race like perfectly for the film. Like I just created the best metaphor by how I messed this up and,
I love
where
that.
I'm struggling and where I'm pushing through. So, yeah, I guess I'm proud of myself for messing it up correctly.
Yeah, it's just like life. It's messy and wonderful all at the same time, right?
That is definitely true.
And I gotta imagine um going up is a lot harder than going down, except for you're going down on those, I mean, it's steep. It's, you probably have to be really careful. And I'm sure it's trying in a different way, which is also, I think, a big metaphor for life too, right? It's like what you might perceive as easy has its own different challenges. Going down that hill.
Totally. And personally, like my favorite is climbing. So,
Oh,
like even in the film that comes through is like the biggest climb is the race. Like there's a couple 3,000 foot climbs, and that's my happy place. Just from growing up in the mountains, like that's what my body knows how to do, and that's when I can kind of just like settle in and I feel most myself. And that's still the case. When I run a 100 miler, like I'm just like begging and waiting to get to a big climb.
oh gosh.
So, what is training for something like this like? So, does it, you finish the Leadville 100 for this year and then you immediately take a little time and start back up? Or, I mean, I'm just so curious what the regimen is for something like this.
Yeah, I mean it's different for everybody. Personally, like when I was starting out in ultra running, it was kind of like a sole focus of trying to zero in on one race a year. And for me, like my motivation's always been pure for 100 miles. That's kind of what the film feel it all centers in on. When I was going through the darkest moments of my life, the scariest suicidal episodes I've ever been in, I used to tell myself if I can make it through this, if I can get out of bed right now, if I can survive to see tomorrow, then I can do absolutely anything. I can climb any mountain, I can ski any line, and I can run 100 miles. And so I'd lock in on that third one. And that's largely the goal that the story of Feel It All centers around. But having that like very clear motivation, that very clear why is a huge part of being able to push through and do these things. But I mentioned that because like for me, the training when I started out was like so solely focused on like running 100 miler a year. That yeah, it takes, most of the year to prepare for that. Um, and now I'm a little bit more relaxed about the whole thing. And I think it's, really a lot of time on feet. It's having a lot of confidence in the strength and durability of my body. And that really just comes from a lot of miles and a lot of time outside. And from a scientific perspective and the training perspective, a lot of it is building aerobic volume and just building a really huge aerobic base. And that comes both over a lifetime and then in that year of training that's in the lead up.
Yeah, so I think obviously physically what you're just talking about, and then mentally is a whole nother, thing to train for. And it sounds like you kind of have like the two motivations, right? The motivation for you to stay healthy mentally, but also you're doing this to spread the word for, for mental health. And it sounds like a kind of now you're taking on this. I don't know if it's the words obligation, but kind of feeling like there's something more out there and bigger of telling your story and having this run. So it sounds like, okay, now you got to prepare physically, but mentally, for yourself as well as telling your story.
Yeah. Um, it I don't think I have to like prepare that much mentally to like tell my story or like use it to help others. Like that creates a really deep motivation to be able to use it all for something much greater than myself. Um, but I think that's really just from a confidence built over time. Like number one, to build an inner confidence with myself before I started sharing my story publicly. And then honestly, I just have a lot of reps with it. So like I'm to a point, is it okay if I swear on this?
Yes.
Cool. So like when I decided to share my story publicly, I had to get myself to a place where if that didn't jive with anyone or if people looked at me, as less of a person for that or whatever, I just had to be to a place where like I had the mentality just fuck them. Like
Right.
that's it.
Yeah.
And so I'm really rooted in that fuck 'em mentality
Yeah.
still. So I don't have to prepare too much mentally for that side of things. I will say though the logistics and the like creative lift of also making a film project out of running a 100 miler was a pretty big weight to take on
I
for
bet.
sure. Uh, at the time, I was like kind of dismissive of it. I remember like my friends and my brother being like, is this like stressing you out? And me being like, no, no, I got this. Like, no worries. And then like now, um, this summer I ran two different 100 milers. I ran the Leadville 100 again, and uh, this year when I ran Leadville, it was like with the least like expectations, like no cameras, no media obligations, and it was like, whoa, that was so much easier than
Yeah.
directing a film
Yeah.
while I'm running. Um,
Yeah. No
so
cameras in
yeah,
your face.
that does end up being I don't know. I'm careful with the wording around that because I don't want to call it a pressure because it's also a choice and it's also like a creative act as well as an act of service for using it to help people.
And how have you seen this film? It obviously has resonated with a lot of people. Are there any examples you have of just exactly how it's resonated with them and stories you might have heard of how it's inspired others?
Yeah, I think um one of the lessons that I've learned like along this journey, and a lot of the inner work that I had to do on myself to really address my own mental health along my path was realizing that external validation is never the solution to internal turmoil. And with that, like I also had to like release myself from external validation of creating this film, putting it out in the world, and the success of it had to rely on it being true to myself and then it helping whoever it helps. It's not about how many hundreds of thousands of people it helps. It's really just that it helps who it's supposed to. And so in that vein, like I don't focus much on like metrics or who it's helped out there, and it's done a lot in that regard. And even like in the past year, like I am really proud that we've done in the first year of Feel It All, we did over 50 live events. And I really believe like in-person experiences are a way to create lasting, meaningful change because that's an experience that somebody's going to be able to remember for the rest of their life, not just watching a film on YouTube. And but I think like for me, it's really more about like the one-on-one interactions and like really hearing it in people's voices of the impact that it's had on them. And so like it was really cool because I released the film just over a year ago now. Um, we released it online when the shotgun went off to start the 2024 Leadville 100.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yeah.
and so I was running again, and I was at like I think it's about mile 22, which is oddly specific, I know. Um, but it was like 7 a.m. So I'd been running for about 3 hours. And at 7 a.m., there is somebody on the side of the trail, and they're like, Drew, I watched Feel It All. Like
Oh,
the
that's
movie was
nice.
amazing. And like I'm not running that fast. So I'm like, really? You watched it this morning? And she's like, yeah, I woke up early so I could watch it before I came out on the course to
Oh,
cheer.
excellent.
And like that was like so crazy to me. Like this is somebody I've never met before, and like
Yeah.
to see like that somebody cares that much was really powerful. And then I ran Leadville again this year in 2025, and it was really neat to like feel and hear the impact out on the course. Um, I don't know how many people said something to me. A lot of people out on course. There's about 750 runners who start Leadville, and so you end up interacting with a lot of people out there, and it's an out and back course too. So you see just about everyone, um, and it was really special to be out there on course and end up sharing some miles with people who it really impacted and resonated with. Um, and it's cool because then like you know, my story became a part of their race, and a lot of people out there told me it's why they wanted to run Leadville, and um, that was really special. I guess I'll share this story. This is the first time I've shared this story. Was so one of the made up rules that I made up for myself in 100 milers is no tears till the finish line. And I think anybody who knows me, anybody who's seen a film probably finds that ironic because they know how much I cry. Um, but that's kind of why, so that I could, stay locked in and stay focused. Um, and that's always been my rule. But um, this year I told myself that if like if my heart wanted to break that rule to just let it happen. Um, and it happened twice out on course. The first one is a deeply personal story that I'll keep to myself for now. But the second time, um, I was at about, want to say I'm like around mile 57, 58, pretty deep in the race. And it was also like when I was hitting my first wall this year. Um, I was in a pretty bad way and I had to take a couple minutes at the aid station to get some hydration down. I was pretty badly dehydrated, and also I was at like 12,000 feet,
Yeah.
so like,
A little high
needed to
up
take
there.
care of myself for a sec. And I was like, all right, I better start getting out of here. And um, right as I'm about to leave, this guy comes over. His name's Derek. Um, Never met him before, and he says, "Hey, man, um, I dropped from the race." Um, I DNF'd right here. And I stayed to wait and see you come back because it's an out and back course. Because I wanted to tell you that Feel It All is why I'm here. And um, I think people who have struggled with mental health or um, struggled with suicidal thoughts, um, understand like when people say that, it's also like in a macro sense to a degree. At least it felt like that when he told me, and maybe I'm just reading that, but um, he said, "That's why I'm here. That's why I signed up for the race, and I just really wanted to tell you that." And that like just totally broke me. Um, and I was in a really vulnerable state at that point in time, but just like fully broke down. Gave him a big old hug, and um, I I had to check out with the medics before I was leaving that aid station, and um, I've met a couple of these guys before, who are the medics there, and I'm just like bawling my eyes out, and I'm like, this isn't like this isn't medical.
Yeah.
Like a stranger just said to my face why I'm alive.
Oh gosh.
And and uh and they know like my story, they know about Feel It All. They know, that element of what makes me part of the Leadville family. And I ran out of that aid station like literally sobbing.
Yeah.
Um and so I'm like running down through this like alpine meadow, just literally sobbing with tears flowing out of my eyes. And um, I guess like, you ask what the impact has been for other people, but that was the probably like the most impactful moment of like what that impact for other people has meant to me. Um,
That's
and
huge.
I guess like, in the past year, there's a lot of interactions like that, but that's the one that like really hit me and certainly was recent. The other like the other piece that I'll share is that it's impacted a lot of kids, and a lot of young adults. And I take a lot of pride in that. And, um, it's part of why I do all of this. And um, I think kids are also magical in that they express themselves in such a more authentic way than so many adults. And so whenever kids have shared with me what it's meant to them, or whenever I get to go into schools, that really does mean the world. And sometimes with kids too, like you don't really realize the impact that you're having that day. And then, you know, sometimes these kids will DM me on Instagram, months later, or I'll get an email from their parents, or from one of their teachers or something. Um, but yeah, I'm more than anything, I'm very touched, and my heart is very full, and I'm very grateful for the people I've gotten to connect with. Even though it's, in a vacuum, it's me helping them. Outside of that vacuum, it's really creating this reciprocal relationship.
Wow, that is, thank you so much for sharing that story. I know that is, very personal, and um it's so great to, see the vulnerability and just sharing that and what that means to you. And you're talking about Colorado there, like Colorado's your family, right? You're from Colorado. I mean, you're running the hills, you're skiing them, and now we get to have you for a little bit here in Idaho. And I just, I'm so excited you're coming here because our children and our parents need someone like you here. And this actually makes me a little emotional too. I didn't think, now you got me crying, Drew. um, because we have a lot of kids that are hurting, a lot of kids that have lost friends way too young, and I think they feel lost. And I think I'm just so glad that you're coming here to share your story. I think what you're doing is impacting so many people. And so I kind of want to segue into there and get myself together for a minute. But and talking about your visit here, and bringing Fill It All. Um, you're here for you're going to do some schools, right, in the Egyptian theater. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what you're going to do when you're here and how people can see the movie. And
Yeah, I'm really excited to come up to Boise. Thanks to the Boise community for wanting me there. Um, and Idaho is also a place that I personally love. I haven't spent a lot of time in Boise, but I've spent a lot of time in the mountains of Idaho. And um, I ran a 100 miler up in McCall called I Am Tough. Um, and I've skied all over Idaho. So lots of positive and life-giving memories have been shaped in the Idaho mountains. So I'm super excited that I get to bring it there. So in the last week of September, we're going to be doing a series of events. I'm going to be screening the film and then also speaking at four different high schools in the Boise School District. I'm also going to be speaking at Boise State University. And those events in the schools are going to be private, and those are for students. And so, helping out the kids and helping out young adults when we go to Boise State. But then all of this effort and this series of events culminates in a community event for the public on September 25th at the Egyptian Theater. And I really view events like this as a community celebration on mental health. So we're going to be combining a film screening of Feel It All, with a keynote talk that I'm going to be giving. I call this keynote, My Story is the Story of Our Community, because really when I'm sharing my story, it's not just mine. And once I share it, it's no longer mine. It's, whoever's there to listen, it's whoever's there to pass it on and become that ripple effect. Um, and so with that, would love to see anybody and everybody from the Boise community there on September 25th. That event is going to be all ages, and we're really hoping that it becomes, a little microcosm of the fabric of the community at large. And I take a lot of pride of that in the events that I've done of getting that whole range of community there, because it really does take all of us to shift the culture of mental health. It's not just for those who struggle, it's not just for those who know that they're surrounded by people who are struggling, but I guarantee that, folks who don't know, their neighbors, their friends, their family are also going through things like this. So it's well to, be educated about all of it. And then also, I think, we hopefully get some of the crowd there who's just coming for a skiing and running film, and then we're going to hit them with an old bait and switch. We're going to be talking about mental health and suicide prevention, and uh, they're going to become a part of that cultural change too.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's for everybody, right? And that's what I love about it. I think it's about a 30, tell me if I'm wrong, about the film first is like a 30-minute film. Is that about right? And then you're going to be doing, be up on stage and be a Q&A or just talk to people, or how's that kind of, what can people expect from that night?
Yeah, so we'll screen the film. It's a 34-minute film. I do think, like, the film's available on YouTube. So if you're listening to this and you're not in Boise, you're not going to be able to go to an event. Like, it is available on YouTube. But it's way better to watch it on the big screen. And it's also way more impactful to watch this film on the big screen when you're surrounded by other people. Because then the lights come on after the film and you see all these other people in your community care and are impacted by this story. Um, and then I'm going to be following that with a keynote talk. Like I said, the title of that is My Story is the Story of Our Community. And then after that, we are going to have some space for Q&A. I find that Q&A is really important to just create that space for conversation. And I always make a joke, even right now we can make a joke out of it, but that these events are a conversation, even though I'm the one with a microphone and nobody else has one. But it really is a conversation because we're in that same space emotionally. And then, like I said, this is a conversation because these are stories and this is a topic that it becomes the responsibility of everybody there to carry forward and bring that conversation to their dinner tables, bring that conversation back to their families, back to their friend groups, back to their, spheres, whether that be built on, sport or any other community gathering. Um, and so, yeah, ending it with a Q&A is really important for that conversation. We're also going to have a bunch of local resources there. Um, and it's really great, to be able to use something like this to get people through the door, but then also connect them with people who are already doing great work in the community, like you folks, and, loop them into, what really can become a moment of funneling the energy into some inertia that's going to have a lasting direction.
I love that. Meet them where they are, right? Even if they're just coming for a film about running and skiing, like you said, rope them in, meet them where they are. So you're going to be doing that that speech at the Egyptian Theater, but you're also launching a TED Talk during Suicide Prevention Month. Do you want to talk a little bit about that TED Talk and give us a glimpse of what you'll be sharing there and how it might connect to the film and all that great advocacy work that you do?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'm launching my TED Talk online right now. I gave a talk at TEDx Breckenridge last winter. So Breckenridge is in Summit County, Colorado. So this is where I grew up, and it was special to get to do it as a part of that. And it's like, while I'm launching this, it also gives me an opportunity to reflect, and I'm really glad that I waited till 2025 to give that TED Talk rather than like a year earlier as part of that TEDx Breckenridge event, just because I've had another year of growth and understanding, both in myself, but then also in my craft of storytelling and speaking. And so it was a really great opportunity to get to share more of my story. The title of the talk is How Asking for Help Saved My Life and Can Change the Culture of Mental Health. And when I was writing the talk and coming up with it, I had to kind of boil down like a TED Talk is under 18 minutes. So that's really not a long time to share a story. And like I, much of my story really comes down to like my journey of mental health being lifelong. So it's hard to make it an 18-minute sort of thing. And it really boiled down in my eyes to asking for help. Asking for help is something that I never did growing up. I was built on rugged individualism and like a very traditional sense of like being a mountain man. Um, and so I had to learn how to ask for help. And for me, I had to be pushed into desperate enough situations to do so. The first of which being a near-death accident in the mountains in 2017. And I literally had to scream help to strangers um, in that moment. And that was the first time that I had to do so. But at the time, I wasn't ready to learn that lesson of asking for help until later on, when I really spiraled from the PTSD from that accident into depressive and suicidal episodes to a point where I was either going to end my own life or ask for help. And fortunately, I chose the latter and I asked for help. And now I've gotten to, have like re-engineered my life in this mission of mental health awareness and suicide prevention. And along the way, I've seen how the simple act or seemingly simple act of asking for help is how we welcome those around us to do the same. And in that, we have the opportunity not just to help the individual next to us, but to shift the culture of our community and to shift the culture of mental health in our society. And so I did my best to boil that down into less than 18 minutes.
Well, sitting here talking about, mountain men, right? It kind of, we had our last episode had um, Jake Stockton on here, and he started a foundation for his son that he lost a couple of years ago. And he is talking about the same, like, well, I've never, as a man, and a boy, I never learned to talk about my feelings. Men didn't do that. Boys didn't do that. And I love having you on here now and like kind of driving home this message to men and boys that, okay, it is okay to ask for help. You can be vulnerable as a man. And we're finally, I hopefully with people like you and Jake and people out there speaking and saying, you can be vulnerable and you can ask for help. Is finally, I think we're starting to get there. But I just appreciate the message, coming from you like that. Just I think it's very important nowadays because it's always been like, oh, he was saying I always have to be the strong father and provider, and he's like, now I know I can be tough and vulnerable at the same time, and it's okay.
Thank you for seeing the need for men to step up, but also the need for men to be impacted by all of this. 80% of deaths by suicide in the US are by men.
Yeah.
And that is a terrible statistic that breaks my heart. But I also very deeply understand why. And, um, I think so much of our traditional view and lens on masculinity is built on strength. And there's nothing stronger than asking for help. As somebody who literally runs 100-mile ultramarathons as my side hobby and jumped off 80-foot cliffs on my skis, like asking for help takes way more strength than that. And as men, but as human beings, we can take a lot of pride in having the strength to be able to ask for help because strength is a shared part of the human experience for every single human on this planet, just the same as struggle is. And we can lean into that and we can lean into that strength and step into our own and ask for help when we need it.
Do you ever think that it's also something, asking for help, has it ever been something you had to practice, like something that's gotten easier with time?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question.
Mhm.
Anything that you're gonna be good at in life, you got to practice, right? So asking for help is definitely the same way. And for me, when I hear the word practice, I think like the truest form of practice in my life is my meditation practice. And you only get better at it the more you do it. And it's definitely the same with asking for help. And it's really uncomfortable. It's really scary when you start out, and you kind of got to learn to dip your toe in the water and ask for help in simpler ways. But it definitely does get easier, and you definitely get better at it.
So, coming away from this on the 25th, what do you want people, what do you want the Boise community to get from this walking away? We have the sense of community and, we're talking about mental health and like you guys are talking about the bait and switch, also get some entertained from some good running and skiing moments. But what is the real thing that you want to drive home and people feel leaving from watching this film?
I'm a bit of a moonshot guy and a moonshot thinker. So like I mean the mission is to shift culture and to have this be a moment that people can look back on for years to come and say that was something that shifted the trajectory that this community has been on. And that's a very strong goal, I know, but it's what we need, isn't it? And
Absolutely.
and so in that sense, like I want people to be able to connect with their community. And like I said, by coming into a theater, you get to see how many other walks of life are in there and how many hundreds of other people in the community care about these things. And it shows that you are so far from alone. And I think, a lot of the success of what I've done and the films I've created and of these events is just making people feel less alone. Like on the most simple human level, that's what we all need. But really, like the snowball effect is for us all to feel less alone, and that ultimately to save lives. Um, I really believe that the in-person experiences have the ability to do that, but then also to create, what's commonly referred to as the ripple effect. But for the people who are there to carry the message forward into the Boise community, and like I said, keep it going for years to come.
I'm so excited to be there. Like I said, we'll have a table there as a resource. I'm excited to be a part of it. Grace and I are from not only from Boise, but we're from the downtown from this area and have been a part of this community for a very long time. And so I'm just excited to see our community members come out together. And we are strong. We are a really strong community, and there's so much love around. So I'm excited to just to see everybody there and like you said, how see the ripple effect go, because like I said, we've gone through a lot of hurt in the last couple of years. So I think it's very much needed. and I'm excited to see it and to see everybody there. So, and we'll make sure, just so everybody knows, that it will be on our website, the children'shomeidaho.org, so they can purchase tickets, as well as the Speedy Foundation. Um, and then we'll just, yeah, we'll make sure there's a link out to all that. So,
Awesome. Yeah, and you can find everything on my website as well, drew-petersen.com. Have links to the tickets for the event on the 25th there, as well as the film Feel It All and my TED Talk as well.
right. I love it. We need to get everybody out there, spread the word. And again, if you can't make it, you can always watch it online. And I also think it's something that, someone, you can go and watch it there. And then it's great to go and watch it with your friends later, and share it with them. And, something you can watch at home, watch as a family. So,
Yeah, 100%. I think like uh I hear from a lot of different people like the way that the film's impacted them or whatever, and like that's one of the coolest ways that people tell me it's impacted them is like uh like on a like more extreme degree, people have told me like I shared this with my family because you've put words to what my experience is better than I've ever been able to. And asked my family to watch this so that they could understand what I'm going through. But then like I also like I got a message from a guy who's like kind of like mid 20s, like ski bum like kind of guy. And he's like, I'm getting a bunch of my friends together for dinner so that we can watch your movie and talk about it. And like how cool is that
yeah,
for like young men to be able to use it as a conversation starter for a conversation that uh is very, very rare amongst that
yeah,
demographic of people.
absolutely. Or I can see this going across for teams, baseball teams and hockey teams and soccer, all of that. What a great way to start off your season by all getting together and watching a film like this. And I think it opens up a lot of it, it lets them ask questions or have those discussions as
Totally.
well.
Yeah, I always say that whether it be on an individual level, a community level, or a societal level, the solution starts with talking about it.
Yeah.
And even the smallest conversation can create a lifeline and can create a safe space for somebody. For the people at my events, like I tell them like if you even just like put in your group text like, yo, I was at this event, like I thought this movie was really cool. Like that seems like so like simple and surface level, but like there might be somebody in there. There's definitely people in your life who, they hear that you enjoyed a movie about mental health. Like you just became a safe space for
Yeah.
them and you just became somebody who they can talk to, not just when they're at their best. And that is a really helpful and supportive role to be able to play, even on the most simple level of starting a conversation.
Yeah, I think Kat of the Speedy Foundation brought that up in one of our episodes. Is sometimes people are just waiting for someone to make that first comment or that say the first word, and then you kind of are like, oh wait, I am in a safe place. So maybe just starting the conversation off, and this movie's a great way to start that conversation for sure.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's vulnerability begets vulnerability.
Yeah,
Um, But the magic of that is that somebody has to start it.
let's all be vulnerable together.
Yes, let's.
I have a question that's not related to the movie, but an Idaho ski question, because I know there's people that might want to know this. What's your favorite place to ski in Idaho?
Ooh. Um,
I'm putting you on the spot.
Probably the favorite place, my favorite run I've ever skied in Idaho was probably um, Mount Bora, highest peak in
Okay.
the state in the Lost
Yeah.
Rivers. I I scored like the perfect day there, like 3,000 feet of just like 4 feet of 4 inches of like fresh powder
Yeah.
and just like fully stable, and you could just ski as fast as you wanted.
I love it. Yay. Well, is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners about? I think we've touched on a lot of it, but any last minute thoughts or anything to tell them?
Well, for whoever's listening to this, thanks for listening to the whole thing, and thanks for listening to me talk for a long time. But I think the last thing that I would say is that if you're listening to this and any of this resonates, just know that uh, by being a human being on this planet and being alive, no other qualifier necessary. You are worthy of love and hope and understanding and support, whether that be a friend or family member listening to you and giving you that space or professional help. You are worthy of that and you deserve it. And there doesn't need to be any justification beyond that. So if you're listening, know that there are people around you who will give that to you.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Drew. That's a perfect way to end it. We just appreciate you so much and appreciate the strength that comes with your vulnerability. And are just really excited to get to meet you in person in the next couple weeks and have you here to bring our community together. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on and for having a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to meeting you both in person.
Thank you, Drew. Really appreciate it.
We're so grateful to Drew for sharing his story with us today.
Don't miss the chance to connect with Drew in person at the Boise premiere of Feel It All, Thursday, September 25th. Doors open at 6 and film starts at 7 p.m. at the Egyptian Theater in downtown Boise. You can buy tickets today at children'shomeidaho.org.
And don't forget to listen to Drew's TED Talk that continues this important conversation. Thanks for listening. Until next time.